24 years and 50,000 flights ago, the China Clipper left San Francisco, headed westward on the first scheduled flight across any major ocean. The classic flying boat was luxurious for its day, not bad even by current standards. Over the then under construction Golden Gate, westward toward Hawaii, Guam, Wake Island, destination Manila, and history. Today, 50,000.
Lindbergh, trailblazer of the skies, winged emissary of a new and thrilling age of discovery. Over the historic trails of Columbus, of conquistador, of clipper ships of another age, he was the first to brave uncharted skies. Pioneers of a new generation follow the trails blazed by him, that America's commerce may once again be first upon the trade routes of the world. Today, over a network of 40,000 miles, Pan American Airways, largest of the world's great airways systems, with a fleet of 150 clipper ships, speeds men, mail, and merchandise to 40 different countries, a thrilling monument to the United States Airmail Service. Across the vast Pacific in 60 flying hours to the Orient, halfway around the world. For just as the Pacific disappears on the right, South America appears on the left, and the routes of the flying clipper ships speed southward to Mexico, Central America, and across the Caribbean to circle the vast southern continent. Starting our aerial cruise over the famous Lindbergh Trail, our first voyage takes us to Havana. Once days away, aboard one of the giant clipper ships, this gayest of Caribbean capitals is now but 130 minutes from Miami. Eastern International Gateway between the Americas, this port of the clipper ships is the transfer point for the airliners from the north that speed thousands of passengers, tons of mail, and air express for the clippers to wing southward to another continent. From the Atlantic seaboard, the Middle West, the coast, Canada, even Europe and the Orient, they pour by the thousands through Pan American Airways' great terminal to take the high road to Rio, Panama, and far-off Buenos Aires. On their way to points all over the globe, more than 200,000 sky travelers have passed through here. Businessmen who find the aerial trade routes swiftest, pleasure travelers in search of all the color and romance of faraway places. All come to travel in the swift, sure comfort of the giant flying clipper ships. Larger than the ship in which Columbus first crossed the Atlantic, these aerial giants are great 21-ton airliners. Manned by veteran crews of 5 flying officers, they operate with meticulous precision and have a record for dependability unsurpassed by any form of transportation. Across the shimmering waters of Biscayne Bay, the great engines, more powerful than a locomotive, lift us easily into the air. In a moment, we glance down to see the terminal base passing below. It's hard to believe we're aboard an airliner, so large and roomy are the cabins, so smooth and quiet its flight. All too soon, the shimmering blue of the Gulf Stream merges into the outline of Cuba's coast, and we're over Havana. A city close to the States, yet one which has an entirely different atmosphere. It is cosmopolitan, European, Spanish, but above all, it is delightful. It is now far removed from the days of pillaging and fighting along the Spanish Main, when Havana was a center of attacks from freebooters and pirates. This fortress, which overlooks the waterfront, was built in 1774 and cost the unbelievable sum of $14 million. The King of Spain, when told of the amount, looked westward across the Atlantic, as he remarked that anything that cost that amount of money should be visible from any part of the world. Facing the waterfront is a beautiful domed palace of the President with a palm-lined walk running down to the ocean. Today, sections of the old wall, which at one time surrounded the entire city, still stand. The Capitol is among the most beautiful and expensive buildings of the world. Its great dome dominates the city. The Prado, where everyone promenades, runs from the sea to the main park, which is surrounded by interesting buildings. Even this cigar store maintains the Spanish atmosphere, with colorful tiles depicting the life of Don Quixote. This great old cathedral and the surrounding buildings are among the original Spanish landmarks of Havana. True to Spanish architectural traditions, many buildings are built around a patio, such as the City Hall, with its statue of Columbus. Outside the city of Havana, we find rural Cuba most interesting and attractive. At Matanzas, a valley fringed with royal palms stretches down to the sea. And along the shores, the coconut palms shade beaches where the warm waters of the Caribbean beat softly upon the coral sands. At the little village of San Diego de los Baños, the terraced homes could be a hillside in the Pyrenees. Cuba is really a land of everlasting summer, and its extensive beaches are crowded the year round. Of course, if one chooses, he may escape from the bright sun and sip iced drinks in the cool Spanish-arched patios. Cuba is always pleasure-loving, but at night, life centers about Havana, where beautiful women and handsome men gather, or meet beneath the stars at...
The second flying step down the Lindbergh Trail spans all the West Indies in a single day. Crossing Cuba, the clipper ships speed on over Haiti, Santo Domingo, and Puerto Rico, thence along the tropical isles of the Caribbean to Port of Spain, Trinidad. Flying over oceans to new lands is a new thrill. As our Skyliner speeds across the blue Caribbean, we pass over Cape Haitian at the tip of the fascinating island of Haiti. It was here that Christophe, the Black Emperor, made famous in the stories of Emperor Jones and Black Majesty, built his mighty citadel atop a 3,000-foot mountain peak. By means of manpower, such as must have been employed in the building of the pyramids of Egypt, the huge blocks of stone and galleries of cannons were dragged up the almost inaccessibly steep sides of the mountain. Many are the stories of this brutal achievement. One that a group of men almost at the point of exhaustion while trying to pull up one of the heavy cannons complained they could not do it alone and pleaded for more men to help them. Christophe ordered every 10th man shot as a warning. The ones remaining then, struggling to preserve their own lives, did the job alone. Across the island, at the end of a long bay of deep blue water, we come to the city of Port-au-Prince, capital of Haiti. Along the waterfront, the fishing fleet anchors, and the fishermen barter their goods to the people from the mountains for staple products, which their life at sea prevents them from raising. In some of the picturesque villages around Port-au-Prince, the little thatched-roofed houses are very attractive and the people most friendly. Even the women enjoy smoking pipes here. In the center of the city, the marketplace is a scene of constant activity. From very early morning till nightfall, all manner of goods are traded, from old shoes to firewood. Many of these natives travel for as much as 2 days on foot, carrying great packs of produce on their heads to the marketplace. The more affluent ones use these little burros for transporting their wares. And if there's room, they climb aboard too.
Not far away, the imposing cathedral overlooks the restlessness of the market. While nearby, in a large square in the center of the town, is the beautiful White Palace of the President. Great bowers of brilliant bougainvillea add their note to this pictorial canvas, already charged with the color of Haiti. Boarding our flying clipper ship again, the motors roar, the checkered flag signals all is clear ahead, and off we go to add more thrilling experiences to our trip in the other islands of the Caribbean. Puerto Rico, meaning rich port, is the largest American possession in the Caribbean. San Juan's central square is dedicated to Columbus, who discovered Puerto Rico. The Spanish Club Fountain of Lions is a copy of the one in the Alhambra in Spain. And in the seclusion of this patio, we find this inviting swimming pool. The original White House of Ponce de Leon, who discovered Florida in his search for a fountain of youth, stands above the heavy stone walls of the original fortifications of Puerto Rico. El Morro, the impregnable, never in its colorful history successfully attacked from the sea, still jets out into the blue Caribbean, a monument to Spain's one-time mighty hold on the New World. From a sentry box in the walls where Spain kept a constant watch on pirates and enemies, a sentinel mysteriously disappeared one night. And with the setting of the sun, the wash of waves and cool night breezes, it is filled with ghostly whisperings and is called the Haunted Sentry Box. Blue oceans and cocoa palms are symbols of all the fascinating tropical isles of the Caribbean. Fort-de-France, the chief city of French Martinique, was the birthplace of Josephine, who through her marriage to Napoleon became Empress of France. In 1902, a tragedy stunned the world. Mount Pelee, quiescent now, erupted, not as a flow of lava, but as a huge cloud of intensely hot cinders and ashes. This cloud rolled down the mountain over the 30,000 inhabitants of the city of Saint-Pierre. In 4 minutes, there was not a soul left alive in the city except one man, a convict in this cell. The walls were so thick and the openings so small that he alone survived. Wings speed us again across the lovely isles of the blue Caribbean, basking in the mild sunshine of the tropics. And we're in Trinidad with its blue waters and palm-fringed shores. Cocoa or chocolate is raised here in abundance. The beans are found inside these fruits, which grow on the main branches of the trees. Outside of the cities, the little thatched roof homes are extremely picturesque. To keep the houses cool, the native people do their cooking outside in mud ovens. This girl is drying cocoa beans in the sun. There are many Hindus in Trinidad, and their mosques or temples add a bizarre note to the Caribbean architecture. In the courtyard of one of the mosques, to the rhythm of native music, a ceremonial dance is in progress. No women can take part in these dances, so their parts are taken by men, adorned in costumes of dancing women. All Hindu dances are ritualistic and are based on some old legend. Thus, in a little chain of islands, east meets west, we have found bits of Spain, France, Britain, and a black republic. Truly an exotic combination of life and interest in this romantic adventure through the Caribbean. From Port of Spain, the clipper ships cruise over the jungle empires of the three Guianas to the equator and Belém Pará in Brazil. Thence up the great Amazon River to Manaus, a transatlantic steamship terminal 1,000 miles from the sea. Soaring swiftly through southern skies, our flying clipper ship speeds us on to the Guianas. We arrive at Georgetown, the capital of Great Britain's only possession in South America. As the pontoons of our ship gently skim over the water, it becomes an exciting realization that at last, in one of the few countries whose innermost regions are not completely explored, and where even the beaten paths remain unexploited. Georgetown itself is a sturdy, clean British city almost on the equator, where natives of India, England, Africa, and the Aborigines of South America congregate and trade on its many streets and marketplaces. Outside the city, palm-fringed canals lead the way to plantations of sugarcane, then through vast rice fields. Native women labor under the hot tropical sun and up to their knees in mud, planting rice. British Guiana is a network of rivers which wind their way through great jungles. In a voyage up one of the great rivers to Kaieteur Falls, the unexplored jungle shores are alive with animals which peek at us from the underbrush and trees. We are heading for Kaieteur, the most talked of waterfall in the world, and practically inaccessible up to a few years ago. Situated in the heart of a South American jungle, it is now waiting for the tourist explorer who wants to visit the lesser-known parts of the world, to see the more rugged side of nature on this great continent of romantic legend and brave discovery. And here we are, Kaieteur Falls. A huge river piercing the heart of the jungle forest is hurled into space to a point nearly 800 feet below. A spectacle which even awes our Indian guides, and a spectacle which no words can adequately describe. As in our own Grand Canyon, everything in this mighty panorama is on such a huge scale that one loses his correct perceptions of size. However, when one realizes that the entire Woolworth or Chrysler buildings could be placed beneath the falls with still room to spare, an idea of its great magnitude may be achieved. Exploring rivers deeper into the center of the jungle, we find a people whose African ancestors escaped or were left by the slave traders of over a century ago as their ships made port in the Guianas. Going into the interior, they now live as their forefathers lived in the African jungles, untouched by the modern world. A harmless, uncivilized race of people, hiding in the dense jungles from the eyes of the outer world. In Netherlands Guiana, Paramaribo is the quaint seaport capital. In Government Square, the atmosphere is most colonial, with the Court of Justice building and Government House, in front of which stands the monument of Queen Wilhelmina of Holland. The Creoles in Paramaribo have their own dress, Kato Misse so-called, and any event is good cause for a dance. This day it is for the benefit of their own governor, the man with all the braid. Not an official governor, to be sure, but the most socially prominent man in their own circle, and probably the only man in town with a complete uniform and lots of gold braid. This rumba shimmy Charleston combination is hot stuff in Paramaribo's Harlem. And so we come to the end of a chapter on those little known but tremendously interesting countries, the Guianas. Near the mouth of the mighty Amazon River is the city of Belém, Pará, Brazil. This tropical city lies practically on the equator, yet over the Lindbergh Trail it is but 3 flying days from New York City. Belém is the center of activity for the jungle towns and plantations for hundreds of miles around, so its busy waterfront is always filled with picturesque sailing boats. The cathedral is one of the old landmarks of Pará, as is its opera house, which was built in the prosperous days of the rubber boom. Across the red-tiled rooftops, one could see the edge of the great jungles, which are wild and in many parts unexplored. Due to the fact that there are no railroads or highways in this section of Brazil, this city has a modern harbor, constantly filled with ships from all over the world. By plane, we speed over the dense jungles of the Amazon, 180 miles wide at its mouth. In a few hours, we are flying over Manaus, 1,000 miles up the Amazon, Brazil's great metropolis in the center of the jungle. Manaus was the first city in South America to have a streetcar. Imagine this magnificent million-dollar opera house with its blue and gold tiled roof, brought from the jungles, and this beautiful cathedral in the 1900s, when Manaus was the center of the world's rubber market, and when money flowed into the city as rapidly as the Amazon flows past its door. Today it has but a shadow of its former grandeur, but to us it is the starting point of a thrilling adventure in the great interior of the Amazon basin. Traveling up some of the smaller rivers, tributaries of the Amazon, we get our first intimate glimpse of real jungles. In order to see some of the larger birds and animals of this country, we leave our boats for a trek through the jungles. This stork-like fellow with the bulgy neck is a species of the many kinds of wading birds which inhabit the equatorial lowlands. These condors are among the largest flying birds in the world, and as they are carnivorous, they feed on the animals and snakes in the jungles. To them and other vultures falls the job of keeping the forests clean and free from decaying animal matter. Armadillos, that queer combination of tortoise and hedgehog. In the underbrush, we come upon a most curious animal, the anteater. Equipped with a long snout, he can burrow into anthills and often uses his stiff, bristly tail to sweep over the ground and brush the ants into a pile. Upon the trunks and branches of jungle trees are found gorgeous orchids of almost every color and variety, growing wild. Many of the orchids are so delicately patterned that they look not unlike lovely butterflies. Deep into the Mato Grosso section of Brazil, the river takes us to the magnificent Guaira Falls. This great river rushes through narrow, impassable chasms on its way to the sea. A spectacular climax to our unusual jungle adventure. South of Belém Pará, the Southern Cross replaces the North Star in the heavens. And in a single day, the clipper ships span half the coast of vast Brazil on the high road to Rio de Janeiro. Flying down to Rio. Capital of Brazil, the world's most beautiful city, is magnificent from the air. Gliding over the city, we get a glimpse of its rugged, mountainous background, its lovely boulevards skirting the blue beaches. And Rio Harbor, the finest harbor in the world, and for which it is justly famous. As we hear the speed of the four motors of our giant clipper slacken, we can't help but thrill to the fact that we're arriving at the gayest city of the Western Hemisphere, the Paris of the Americas. The main section of Rio is located on the Avenida Rio Branco. The architecture of the older buildings is very European in design. Rio's Opera House is copied after the one in Paris. An oriental touch in architecture is found on one of the narrow side streets, which are crowded during the busy hours of the day. Many of the new buildings are most modernistic in design, with the old and the new mixed together in perfect harmony. Along the main drive to the many beaches are lovely public gardens and fountains, and always the sugar loaf is in the background. Sailing is a popular sport. Rio is a city of color, so it is no surprise to see many red sailboats decorating the brilliant blue waters of its many bays. Ever apparent from all angles of the city is the famous landmark of Rio, the Sugar Loaf. Rising abruptly from the sea to a height of 1,100 feet, it stands like a great sentinel guarding the harbor. One may take a cable car to the top of the Sugar Loaf by day or by night. In the daytime, the panorama of the city lies below. At night, it is equally interesting to look down upon the thousands of lights in the magic city. On the way up, the car is suspended in space, and the countryside is spread out far beneath. Arriving at the top, we realize how high we are, for the whole section of the country is visible as far as the eye can see. And the large buildings of the city look like toy blocks below. A panorama of great interest, as it shows the fine beaches of Copacabana and Ipanema stretching away up the coastline. The residential city itself winding its way among the hills, up the valleys, and around Botafogo Bay. Corcovado is the highest of the many hills, and on its top is a huge statue of Christ, visible day and night from all parts of the city. For dreamers of splendid landscapes, of natural marvels, of sunny seaside places with sandy beaches and crystal blue waters, no other place can be compared to Rio. Copacabana, the most popular of Rio's beaches, is always crowded with swimmers and sun worshippers. Carnival arrives. For months, everyone waits for this event. And for 5 days and nights, no work is done. It is just one great gay holiday. Everyone costumes himself for the event. Some fantastic, some beautiful, some comical, and some mildly insane. But all for one purpose. Everything is sacrificed to joy. Special carnival songs are written each year for this event, and the crowds sing and move to their tempo through the crowded streets. An entire city of nearly 2 million people, all costumed and happy, give up all thought of past or future. It is Carnival, and only Carnival counts.
Pra gente escrever, eu senti correr, o cabo sem saudade da galinha caritão. E consolar essa pequena mulher que não sabe a galinha morreu. Do galo sem saudade da galinha caritão. Do galo sem saudade da galinha.
At night, the milling, singing crowds scarcely make room for the many colorful floats, which add their touch in making this event so spectacular. Night and day, this fantastic carnival continues. Just one of the many reasons why Rio is the city no one can ever forget. Not many miles beyond Brazil's gay capital lies the peaceful city of Sao Paulo, world capital of the coffee industry. One of the most beautiful cities on the southern continent, Sao Paulo's broad avenues, lined with verdant trees, lead to the impressive new monument commemorating the independence of Brazil. An epic masterpiece in bronze, it typifies the greatness of this magnificent country. The landscapes and buildings of the Ipiranga Museum, with its gardens and fountains, remind one of Versailles. Most interesting of Sao Paulo's many sights is the snake farm, where poisonous snakes are raised for study and for making vaccines to combat the poisons of their bites. Familiarity certainly breeds contempt, for this man pays no attention to the many vicious rattlers around him. He teases them to get them in a mood for striking. He and the doctor, by careful manipulation, force the rattler into giving up the deadly poison from its cruelly fanged mouth. A dangerous business, I'd say. To the land of the Argentine on the River of Silver, the clipper ships soar on down the coast over lovely South Brazil to Montevideo, then up the River of Silver itself to the giant city of the southern hemisphere, Buenos Aires. And so, on to Uruguay we speed in this flying clipper ship. Imagine eating a full-course dinner while flying at nearly 200 miles an hour, 8,000 feet in the air. A fascinating thrill for even the most seasoned traveler. Montevideo. From the top of this hill overlooking the entire city, the last remaining cannon reminds us that this was once a Spanish stronghold in Spain's conquest of the New World. The capital of Uruguay is a busy, modern city with a splendid harbor. The main part of town is bustling and cosmopolitan, courteous and cultured. Heavily trafficked streets remind us of our busy thoroughfares back home. True to all the capitals of South America, the buildings of Montevideo hold their own in architectural beauty. A brush peddler with his top-hatted donkey adds a picturesque note to these modern surroundings. Flying along the coast of South America, en route to Buenos Aires, we pass over many picturesque old Spanish cities. their red tile roofs contrasting with the blue waters of the Atlantic. Buenos Aires is the biggest business city in South America and the third largest city in the Western Hemisphere. In a huge square is the Palace of Justice, which faces the Theater Colón, Buenos Aires Opera House. A very modern 32-story apartment house rises next to one of the many parks. The boulevards are extremely wide and flanked by beautiful buildings, some modern in design and others of old French and European architecture, and everywhere parks and statues. The capital is adorned with huge bronze statues and fountains and is at one end of Buenos Aires' main avenue, the Avenida de Mayo. At the opposite end is the coral-colored government house, beautifully situated across a park. In the entrance, day and night, there is always a guard dressed in the uniform of San Martin. The big resort of Buenos Aires is Mar del Plata on the ocean, a gay place with huge casinos, pavilions for dancing, theaters, avenues for promenaders, and of course marvelous beaches and swimming pools. No summer is a success to the people of Buenos Aires without at least a few weeks of Mar del Plata sun. Near the beginning of the Andes Mountains in the western part of Argentina is found a valley carved out with fantastically shaped earth and rock formations. It is rightly named the Enchanted Valley. The big shaft of stone is called the Finger of God. From Lakes Nahuel Huapi and Mascardi, one sees the mighty Tronador, one of the most beautiful of the Andes Mountains and snow-capped the year round. Many of the people in this section of the country still use oxen as beasts of burden. Iguazu Falls on the border between Brazil and Argentina is one of the most awe-inspiring spectacles in the whole world. In the midst of a subtropical virgin forest, a vast volume of water pours endlessly over a total width of nearly 3 miles, to drop 300 feet to a roaring river below. Close up, the water is brownish in color due to its flowing over the decayed vegetation of the immense jungles through which it passes. The force of the water sends up clouds of vapor and gives rise to rainbows everywhere. Between each falls is a heavy growth of tall hardwood trees of the mahogany family, mixed in with palms and tree ferns. This great falls is a fitting climax to our jaunt through Argentina, a great country foresighted enough to preserve all of its natural beauties for generations yet to come.
Here's a truck that has a habit of chasing planes. In fact, it's a business. All aboard Fort Cozumel, Tapachula, Guatemala, Tegucigalpa, Antofagasta. Oh, come on and get in. With a clipper ship in between, it's just 2 steps from the United States to any country south of the border. This truck sure is traveling, and so are its occupants, if it gets there in time. 6 minutes to go, then off to South America. Step on it, driver. That airport is still a mile away. Uh-oh, and this plane waits for nobody. Right in the nick of time. These passengers just won't get ready until the last minute, and there's nothing that can be done about it. In traveling togs before they know what it's all about, loaded into a speedy truck and rushed to the airport, across the gangplank and into the rumble seat. A lot of fuss over a bunch of small fry, but not a peep out of them. What a passenger list. Over 800 this trip. Takeoff time for the Caribbean West Coast Flyer. Motors roar and the clipper ship express trains down the choppy water of the bay. A sweep up into the air and its nose points south, flying down to Rio at a lot of miles per hour. Next plane leaves in 45 minutes, so back again for another load. Thousands pass through this unusual air terminal daily. Jeepers, cheapers! Over 10,000 of these animated powder puffs are rushed to Central and South American markets every week, all because
a new giant joins the Navy's Sky Fleet, the 72-ton Mars flying boat. First of a series of 20 to be named for Pacific Islands, is christened by Mrs. DeWitt Clinton Ramsey, wife of Rear Admiral Ramsey, former Naval Aeronautics Chief. As the Sky Giant slides down the ways at the Martin plant in Baltimore, it becomes the largest flying boat in United States service. It has a 200-foot wingspan and is 120 feet long. Powered with 4 motors totaling more than 8,000 horsepower, the big boat has a speed in excess of 200 miles an hour and can carry payloads of 30,000 pounds or more. Our Navy adds giant wings to the growing cloud over Japan. Even while the huge Mars is making her test flights, another flying colossus, still larger, is under construction at the Hughes Aircraft Company in Culver City. When completed, this flying boat, to be known as the H-4, will weigh 200 tons and be used as a super cargo carrier. Its freight space will equal that of 2 freight cars. The construction is almost entirely of plywood. This is the way the instrument panel will look to the flight engineer. This wing is 320 feet long. American aviation is truly on the march.
This giant French seaplane, powered by 6 motors, was developed during the occupation of France under the very noses of the Gestapo. The methods by which the plane was built, in spite of the Gestapo, are as secret as the plane's specifications. This plane represents France's bid for a place in post-war air commerce. France, a pioneer in aviation, stages a comeback in the world of flight.
Of a storm. In the early days of enemy, our Army and Navy airmen flew through storm and fog and hurricane, 1/5 on instruments, 4/5 on luck, 20 hours out of 24 sometimes, through blind passes, by uncharted peaks, down through zero ceilings, refueled and take off into gray, blind hell. Constantly circled by aerial patrols and never-ending relays.